So in this segment, we're going to be discussing kind of the UK's kind of disaster with the interest rates in the context of renters and then the broader economy. And this is a nightmare. You know, we've seen interest rates go up in the Eurozone, obviously not as high as the UK. I think the interest rates in the US are higher. I'm genuinely not 100% sure how they're coping over there. They have got higher growth and lower inflation, though. But I don't think the story's that great over there, but it's awful here, I can tell you that for free. So we're going to just listen to a couple of clips regarding renting and then move on to the broader economy.
And renting isn't any easier either. Just this week, the BBC reported that every available property now has, on average, more than 20 people competing for it, with rental costs soaring as well. And renting isn't any easier either. Just this week, the BBC reported that every available property now has, on average, more than 20 people competing for it.
So, you know, we've discussed this kind of during the live stream, but I think one of the problems is that a lot of landlords are looking to sell up because the interest rate rises because, you know, again, these houses for them are investments and their investments aren't paying out now. So they're looking just to sell up, especially as the housing market cools off and the houses lose value. And so what that means is the landlords that are left, because there's still a high demand for rented properties, means they can charge people more money. But of course, 20 people per property just to view it goes to show you how kind of bad the housing situation is in the UK, with especially a lack of social housing as well, and people being forced into trying the private sector. It's not good at all, especially when you look at the quality of some of these houses as well. It's an absolute disaster with mold and other things. This is awful stuff here.
Rental costs soaring as well.
And, you know, this is, you know, if you want to talk about the real life consequences, this is what's happening to people around the country.
Our contract was capped at a 5% per year increase. And then shortly after the mortgage crisis and interest rate situation happened, we were contacted asking to raise our rent by 12%. In response to that, we cited our contract and basically said, well, we have a capped contract. And then following that, very shortly afterwards, received a Section 21 notice.
So that's a no-fault, I believe that's a no-fault eviction, which the government are trying to get rid of. But you can see, you know, as soon as they said, you know, what the hell's going on? Why are we being charged an extra 12%? And I don't know if that's on top of the 5% anyways, they, you know, in their contractual agreement. And again, you know, landlords' costs haven't really gone up by 5% year on year, have they? And so you can see kind of the landlord's still making decent money year on year and then trying to increase it by 12%. And then, you know, once they said, you know, we're not going to pay that, or why do you have to pay that? The landlord said, you know, you're done. And it could be the case, as the people in the video point out, like they will do, that the landlord might be looking to sell up. So, you know, increase the rent dramatically. As soon as they dispute it, say, all right, you're done, and then sell up the house.
How did it feel when you got that email telling you you were being evicted?
It's very upsetting because it's sort of a situation in which you're quite powerless. There is very little I can do to sort of stay in this place that I've lived in for the past 4 years, which has been my home.
Every day becomes a lot more stressful and a lot more insecure.
Yeah.
So again, you know, staying at a place for 4 years, I think they've got a pet, you can hear it in the background, towards the start of the video. You know, it's instability, being forced to move around constantly as well, and getting a property within the same town, especially, you know, when you see one property has 20 viewers, it's just nuts.
Yeah, that's really affected you.
Yeah. Yeah.
What do you think's behind your Section 21?
I think there's a bit of a panic in relation to the renters reform bill. I think they don't know if they're going to be able to do Section 21 evictions anymore in, I don't know, 6 months' time. And so they're just trying to squeeze as much profit out as possible, or sell up, move things out of the way.
It does look like that. It does look like the landlords are kind of panicking, thinking, you know, what can we do? Just get rid of them, get rid of the renters, sell up, or just, you know, try and maximise as much as you can. Because again, you know, the the amount landlords can charge has gone up. So, they could say, we're going to increase your rent by 12% and suck it up because there's nowhere else for you to go. And if you want to look at the situation, we've got the genius here, Andrew Bailey himself, the intellectual titan, the master of economics, saying interest rates will not fall until there is solid evidence that price rises are slowing, the Bank of England has told the BBC. Now, we've heard from other kind of former Bank of England workers that, or sort of employees, or however you want to describe them, saying that the Bank of England increasing interest rates is going to cause more inflation. So this guy's an absolute nut job. The only benefit, I guess you could argue, is that mortgages and kind of rents are not included in the CPI. So I guess you can try and argue that. So like, to an extent, it won't increase the kind of inflation rates we are seeing, but you're going to push the costs up for a lot of businesses, and they're going to look to probably increasing their prices in relation to that. We've heard from one of the advisors of Jeremy Hunt saying if we spark a recession, then businesses may be reluctant to put their prices up, workers may be reluctant to ask for a pay rise, and that kind of perspective of using that to kill off inflation is just stupid. What the government should be doing is looking at supply side reform. Yes, not the stupid kind of super pro business and low regulation stuff, but they should be looking at doing windfall taxes and redistributing that money to help people. And they're not doing that. I don't think that would fuel inflation, not really. But this government are just full of absolute knuckleheads. The Bank of England said for the first time that interest rates would stay high for longer in an effort to battle soaring prices. I mean, it's just nuts. And, Andrew Bailey, a guy who backed Brexit, which is causing a lot of supply side problems. You've got companies in the energy sector who are absolutely price gouging people. You have supermarkets that are price gouging people. Why are the government not dealing with that? If you want to deal with soaring prices, deal with the price gougers. But the government just simply keep refusing to do this. If you look at the context of more of these if you look at the context of mortgage holders, you've got a person who is paying sees monthly payments rise from £1,200 to £2,720. How is anyone meant to find the money for that, especially when we're told don't ask for a pay rise, even though the Bank of England's been offering bonuses to its employees, despite the fact that they have absolutely failed us. Their target of 2% inflation. We have, I think, the highest inflation in the G7. We have the highest inflation, or one of the highest inflation rates in Europe. It's just nuts. And my man's offering people bonuses and stuff like that, when I thought we weren't meant to ask for bonuses. We weren't meant to ask for pay rises because that's going to impact inflation. What an absolute knucklehead this brother is, man. Not Prem Sigger. This brother here, fam. Absolute clown. When Mark Carney left, I guarantee you the Chancellor at the time said, find me the biggest clown at any circus, and they found this brother here, Andrew Bailey. Find me the biggest clown, because he's not the or how does the quote go? He's not the clown, he's the entire circus, honestly. This man's an absolute fraud. Hate this guy, honestly, just can't stand it. And if we look at kind of the broader context of the UK,
this is not, looking at the numbers here, this is not an economy which looks especially healthy. It's flatlining, and it's flatlining not just for a few months, but for a few years, even beyond the difficult, challenging times that we've had over the past few years. And so while we have just about got back to the kind of peak in terms of total national income that we had before COVID-19.
So we've just about got back to our pre-pandemic levels. Just about. Germany's gone through a dip, but they hit their pre-pandemic levels and they've dipped slightly, I think, from there. We have just gotten back by the sounds of it. I don't know if Germany went above their pre-pandemic levels and then dipped to that, but Germany's the one that the Brexiteers keep talking about. But again, there's other countries in the EU. You got France, Italy, Spain, all doing a lot better. But they don't talk about those countries. They cherry pick one in the G7. Why is that?
We're basically now flatlining for quite some time. And when you compare the UK to other countries around the world, particularly the United States...
I think comparing us to the United States is always a bad idea because their economy is much bigger than ours, and the dollar is always seen as one of the default options. I think comparing us to the US is always a bad idea. I think comparing us to other European countries makes sense, or most G7 members outside of the US and Japan, because their economy is weird.
Not so much the case in Europe. In many countries in Europe are facing similar issues right now. But
are they, though? Are they facing similar issues to what we're facing now? Really? When France is doing better than us, when their inflation... I think all the G7 members have lower inflation than ours. So, for Ed Conway to say that our situations are similar to Germany, France or Italy is just absolute nonsense. What is he talking about? This is what happens when you bring, because Ed Conway, I don't think he's got an economics background. Why is he talking about economics? And if he does have an economics background, he should give his degree back, honestly, because this is a joke. And this is not the first time I think he's talked absolute nonsense about the government, maxing out the credit cards and all this kind of nonsense. It's not the first time he has done this.
The United States is kind of racing away with its economy. The UK is at best stagnating, and that's what you've seen reflected.
Stagnation. We're talking about narrowly avoiding a recession. That's the bar here, people. That's the bar we're meant to celebrate. It's just madness. You've got here Oliver Dreary, as I like to call him. I don't know, guys. Just the lack of talent in kind of the UK media and amongst kind of the UK politicians. These are not the people you want in a crisis. That's for sure. These are 100%. If a building's on fire, you do not want these people around you. That's for sure.
When we look ahead,
and the economy is very much on fire here.
To what's possibly happening at lunchtime, this is grim news for many people in the UK, isn't it? They are going to feel worse off again by another interest rate rise.
Well, first of all, I really understand how difficult it is for people seeing interest rate rises. Of course, it's up to the Independent Bank of England to make decisions on that. But it is crucial that we act to control inflation, because
they keep saying this, we have to control inflation. They never really explain how. All they say is, it's literally Ivan Drago. It's if the economy dies, it dies. That's the philosophy we're seeing here. Madness.
It's only by making sure that we get inflation down that we can grow the economy and we can reduce the cost of living.
Literally, the whole inflation thing is the same as get Brexit done. We need to get Brexit done. We need to get inflation down, and everything else will fall into place. Get inflation down is the new get Brexit done. Oh my God.
And that requires action by government. That's why we're making sure we live within our means. We don't spend excessively, and it requires...
So what happened with test and trace then?
Action from the bank. The more we can bear down on inflation, though, the quicker we can get interest rates falling, which would be crucial to make sure that people don't continue to have that pain. And indeed, if you look at the inflation numbers, there are encouraging signs that...
I mean, inflation will come down eventually because the price rises. We can't see, 10 to 15% kind of quarter on quarter. That's... If that happens, more and more people will die. The more and more people lose their houses. That's not really how inflation works. It's based on kind of the growth of the last quarter, if that makes sense. So you could have inflation, say quarter 1, 15%. Then you could have inflation 2 of say 10%, and you can say, oh, inflation rates are coming down, but it's still significantly higher than what it was. And that's the thing the government just don't acknowledge. Even if you do half inflation, prices are still going up by 4 and 5%, depending on where you say you're going to half inflation from. What quarter are you using? Stupid. Don't worry though, Penny Mordaunt's on the case with these food pantries.
I'm here today in Paulsgrove Pantry to say a huge...
I think it's just another name for a food bank, to be honest. Because I think food banks have a negative connotation, so they're calling them community food pantries. I assume they'll work the same as a food bank. Credit to everyone who has donated to these food banks. I know they have like donations sections in supermarkets, despite the fact that supermarkets should really be doing more, especially with the amount of food they waste. But yeah, like credits to the people who donate to these things, but at the same time, the UK should not be in a position where we're relying on food banks and quote food pantries.
Thank you to everyone who has helped establish this really important facility, and also to everyone who's helped contribute to the Baffins Pantry as well, which we helped establish. It's about 6 months on since we first set up these pantries, and they are really important to the local community. We're helping about 130 families in Paulsgrove. There's a similar amount being supported in Baffins, and we hope in the coming months to establish...
A question for these constituents, like, do you want to live in an area which is... Do you want to live in a place that's reliant on these food banks and food pantries? Is this really the country you want to live in? Because this is, I'm assuming, within her constituency. Is this what you want, honestly? Like, are these the areas you want to live in, where people are reliant on donations from others in, what is meant to be the 7th richest country in the world? Honestly, is this what you want? Is this your champion?
A new pantry in the Hilsea area. We've
the people of Hilsea, is this what you want for your town?
Now got a site for that, and I think that's going to be a really important asset to that community. especially at this particular time when people are really struggling with the cost of living.
Maybe you should do something about that, given you're a Conservative MP, your party's in government, you're a minister. Maybe you should do something about the cost of living.
I want to say a huge thank you to everyone who has helped.
This stuff makes me sick. Honestly, it makes me sick. Just the way she's kind of celebrating and kind of saying, oh, it's a great thing for the community, which, again, communities do need help, but we should not be reliant on this stuff. We should not be reliant on this. Credit to the community centre for setting this stuff up. This is one of the things community centres should be for, but at the same time, not in my house, Jack, in the words of Joe Biden. This from Prem Sikka saying, workers effectively pay more in tax than landlords. So a worker earning £32,000 pays £3,886 in income tax, £2,332 in national insurance contributions, takes home about £25,782. A rentier with £32,000 pays £2,600 in capital gains tax, zero national insurance contributions, takes home £29,400. I do wonder if the rentier or the landlord can kind of offset some of their tax against the costs of the property. If they can say, well, I had to fix this and that, and therefore, I shouldn't have to pay so much in tax, etc. I think that's the last thing I want to talk about. This is a situation that there are real world consequences for what's happening in this country. Like, just because people see interest rate rises, they think, oh, my mortgage is going to go up, but it's so much worse for certain people, honestly. And the economy's not, contrary to what the genius Oliver Dowden says, raising interest rates will not help the economy grow. Capitalism requires consumption. This is basics. You need people to spend, especially spend more than they can afford, to go into debt effectively. And if people can't do that, the system, it can't grow. And with debt being more expensive, with people being kind of reluctant to spend more because, we might be entering a recession, what it means is it just creates a worsening recession, if that makes sense. You need consumption. If you wanted to grow or expand your business, you might have to borrow the money from a bank. Now, instead of paying, a few percentage points of increase, you're paying closer to kind of 10% interest rates. How are you going to borrow money to do that? How is it going to be sustainable? It just doesn't make sense. And with, rising costs, it's not good. And, Rishi Sunak did an interview on LBC where he was quizzed on some of this stuff. We'll cover it. It was a disaster class, lesson by lesson, honestly. But anyways, I'm going to leave it there. Let me know what you think in the comments below. Like, comment, share, subscribe. Support the channel on Patreon if you can. And hopefully I'll see you in the next one.